So, welcome everyone to our April Psychosomatic Conversations. We're looking forward to just doing something a little bit different today. And what we're going to be doing is opening up the floor to questions and answers around anything psychosomatic, whether it's relationships, behaviors, or health conditions, things that you might want to have additional insight to. So the structure of the Psychosomatic Conversations, we're going to do 2 themed topics, and then every third month, we're going to be doing this Q&A format. So you're invited to all of our conversations, but today it is open to your questions. And I'm presenting today with Sean and Christy, or should I say facilitating with Sean and Christy. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do you want to introduce yourself first, Linda?
Oh, that's probably a good idea. So I am Linda Thackray. I'm based in Sydney. I'm a psychosomatic practitioner. I'm a psychosomatic teacher. So all of us are also teaching the master practitioners as well. And that's probably enough for me. Sean.
Hi, I'm Sean. I have been playing in the holistic field now for 25 plus years. I do body work as well as the psychosomatic therapy, all about encouraging the process called living and bringing about the capacity to live.
Mm.
And I'm
in Melbourne.
Yes.
I am Christy Foster. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I've been in bodywork. This is going on 30 years this year, which is a little crazy. I've been doing bodywork for that long. And my passion is that. Psychosomatics was a beautiful addition to the work I already did. What I love about it most is the awareness it creates for individuals and the empowerment that it provides, because it's very tangible and relatable for all of us. And it's a language that I think our body understands, let alone our mind. So it's definitely my passion. I've been teaching it now for, I don't know, 6 years or so. And I've loved it. I love what I do and really happy to be here. And thank you all for joining us. We love growing this community as well. Yeah. So thank you. You're part of our little bud that's starting to flower, which is great.
So we put it out there to you. If you have any questions that you would like to either put into the chat or to ask us around things that may be happening for you or that you would like to have a conversation on. So shall we start with Maria? You mentioned that you've got a question you would like to ask. Would you like to choose one of the questions that you've got and type that into the chat?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, I'd love to actually, only because this is what's happening at this time in my life. I would like to understand more about brain cancer. I've got brain cancer. I've had an operation. It went really well. The MRI scans all said they were getting on really, really well. Gone through chemo and radiation therapy, but I'm still healing. And I just want to know more about it because it perplexes me. Because usually if a person falls over or cuts themselves, there's a clear symptom there. You can see what's happening. But I can't. I don't know, and I want to know more. And since I'm going really well, I would like to know, because I don't know why this happened. I don't know. I don't have a clear idea of I don't want it to happen again. So I want to know what I shouldn't do. Or how can I know through psychosomatic these things happen?
Yeah. So it's a automatic deep dive for everybody. Did you all take a deep breath with that? It's a very big symptom and a state of dis-ease. And the way in which we say dis-ease is that there is a discord that's occurring. There is, there's two things in particular that we need to highlight.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can I just please ask if you could speak a little louder?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So there are two things that we need to consider here. There is biology, and there's also what's occurring within the biology. So we have, when we look at biology, we need to consider some of the family history that's potentially there, because that is an influence to the cancer marker and how it becomes activated within our systems. As a child of two parents that died of cancer, I am very aware of what is the convergence that takes place within an individual that enables the cells to negatively form. Yes, they're inverted. They're no longer operating in a positive manner. They're operating in an inverted manner. Now, when we look at that, that may sound like a judgment. It isn't a judgment. It's an awareness that there's something within us that's also recoiling. And when it's the mind, we know that relative to where it's positioned within the brain also can give us more of an indicator of the origin of the inversion. So we know that when cancer forms, it's a small space of negativity that becomes a larger one. It's kind of like a conversation left unsaid within us that builds its own little space and then starts taking up space. When we know that it's in that mind space, then we know that there is also a monologue that is running that we want to protect not only ourselves, but others from. So it's kind of like if there was a secret that we hid somewhere within us, relative to where it shows up in the body, shows us where that original impact has occurred, where the hardship has occurred. This is a very intense conversation to be having straight up today, right? Because it's going to lead us into unique conversations that are also aligned. And often when we have a symptom, the body wants us to create clarity. So when we have a situation, and we have such a privilege to be living at this point in time, as Maria is aware, she's had surgery, she's had lots of different treatment applications, and here she is on the call with us today, right? that's a phenomenal experience that's available to us. Yes, if we were alive 100, 200 years ago, people would have just stood around and watched. But these days, there are so many different approaches to the experiences. So we need to understand that, one, the body is making its own call. And when we say the body is making the call, we know that the innocence is bringing a magnetic awareness to a part of us that feels very trapped by its actual presence. So there's something very deep within Maria and her situation that has created itself in such a biological way that she's being asked to deeply consider her own history, her family's history, and what she thinks about that.
And what she thinks about what?
What you think about your family history.
Okay,
Yeah, because it's so deep within the biology, Maria.
thank you.
And therefore, some of our thoughts have been created and become our own. Some of those thoughts have been passed down through the lineage. And at the same time, we're also interacting with a society and what it thinks. And so when we start decompartmentalizing, then we're putting some thoughts in some places and enabling other thoughts appropriately. So this one started out as a whisper and is then formulated itself into the biology. Can I ask whereabouts your particular cancer was, Maria? Yeah, we know it's brain, but which part?
On the right side of the skull, the
Mhm.
brain.
Yep. So on the right-hand side also refers to the left brain is on the right-hand side. So we're looking at some of the greater innocence or creativity or universal aspects of who you are. So we also need to consider, if you look at how the atmosphere that surrounds a child, then we also know, has that child been encouraged to fully be itself? Has the innocence had the ability to know that its willingness to access its unlimited self? Or has there been fences put around that? Has there been consistent limitations around that? Only Maria can answer that question. Are you willing to answer that question, Maria?
Okay. Partly restrictive.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say all of my life was restrictive, but partly restrictive, yes.
Yeah. So that that restriction we know will have been very early in the piece, because it's that we know it's the right side of the brain, but it's the left, it's the side that operates the left side of who we are because of the crossover that happens within the mind space. And have you, in growing up, in noticing those limitations, do you notice them frequently?
Now,
Yes.
no, not really. No.
Okay, good. Good. Because when the body surfaces a symptom, that it's time for the extradition of that process, then it's also completing a process. It's also putting closure to something. The magnificence that I saw by my parents dying through their process is also the completion of something. How somebody finishes something in life is totally up to them. Yeah. We totally know that cancer these days is no longer completely terminal because Maria is completely here with us today. And so there's these conversations that open up inside of our body, not timed by us, but timed by a part of us, in order to find the completion for that outlet. Yeah, it was time that that part of Maria needed resolution. And thankfully, we have the medical industry that's very supportive around that approach relative to how we move through that.
And I don't know how to complete it because the whole incident is still unclear to me.
Right. When you say the incident, do you mean the beginning of the cancer, or do you mean the purpose of the cancer?
Oh, the beginning and perhaps the purpose, because generally I've been quite a healthy person in my life. I rarely go to the doctors or hospitals, but yeah, this is really perplexing. And can I please just say, I don't want to take up all this time on me. I realize that there are other people and that's okay by me, okay?
Yeah, thanks,
I don't
Maria.
mind listening to other people as well.
Oh, yeah. And
And
whilst people are listening to this conversation, they're also locating themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Okay.
degree of this conversation is for everybody. And even the element of the creation of the cancer itself, it sits in the deep recesses of who we are. I'm very aware of my own parents' history and their relationship to their own history, which in turn has influenced the creation of that dis-ease within them, that disorder within them. And there's a propensity there for them. This isn't about me avoiding cancer. This is about me understanding cancer. Cancer may not necessarily be something for all of us. It is for some of us. It's something that becomes activated within each of us, and its location is very specific to the individual.
Well, I've asked the nurses and the doctors, why? And I know this is a very common question. Why?
Yeah,
What did I do?
Yes.
Food, lifestyle. But they all said to me, don't think that way. There's nothing that you did because cancer, they said it was, what do you call it? When there are 5 people in the room, 1 person is likely to get it. So there's no specific reason, nothing that I did, they said, but I can't believe that. I think,
do you want to blame yourself for it?
I don't want to, but I want to have a reason.
Yep.
because if I'm getting better, I need to know what I did in order to get it, so I won't go that way again. Can you
And-
understand me?
Yeah, and there's a fork in the road at that point. The fork in the road at that point is that what had accumulated up till now has had a physical clearing within your body. So it's been removed. Has the behavior to that space or with that space changed? So people will often have organs removed. People will often have situations, take, for example, an appendix, where there's particular behaviors that are being driven into a place or space. And then when they had that removed, sometimes that disorder continues into a different part of the line of that body system, which means the behavior is still running. So the behavior to pull things apart rather than put things together. And what I mean by that is that is the negative patterning of deteriorating something a habit that's existing within them, or are they able to magnetize it so it becomes something that's sacred and honorable within them? Your circumstance could be as simple as that, Maria. You could be at a point where how you relate to yourself is being asked to be reconsidered. Yes, how you relate to your innocence, how you relate to your purity, how you relate to the way in which you bring your signature to life, and how you do that in a liberated way. Yeah, it's something that all of us need to consider. Yeah, as I've moved through life and I've had my own different symptoms, disorders, they are showing me a turning point. Yeah, there's a convergence that's happening. There's a cataclysmic moment where something is being asked to change. And how I engage with myself in that change liberates me from the situation, which is what we call healing. How I resolve. Yes?
And we have a additional question to add into that from Tiffany relating to the same.
Go ahead.
Are you saying that we need to change our behavior or mindset to change the prognosis of our health? And maybe we could also ask Christy's input as well on this one, if that's okay. Christy.
Well, I would say yes, in that, and I wanted to say with Maria too, that sometimes we don't get to know the reason why. Sometimes it's ours to contemplate and feel into and allow the space for acceptance of what is as you move through.
Sorry, there's a big plane coming over. It'll
Oh.
go in a minute. I'll put the mute.
Okay. I was just saying, Maria, that sometimes we don't get to know why things happen. I think it's a human question to say, why did this happen? I need to know why. I do believe that it's part of each individual's person to to contemplate and feel into, like Sean was saying, and explore different ways of finding answers to that. And it's still so personal. I don't believe any person could answer that for you, because it's your own personal ancestral possibly piece to look at and explore. And Tiffany, I think that, you know, whatever we think starts to become materialized over time. So for a really simple example is, if we're identifying with, I am a worrier, for example, the body starts to believe that, and the body starts to process that. And it's like something that's energetic becomes dense. It really starts to become dense and go towards sometimes a specific organ, and begin to move and get larger in that, because what we say is what we create, and the body believes what we tell it. So if we're identifying as a worrier, our body's going to act accordingly, because that is what we're telling it. And what I love about psychosomatics is language. And where is that piece happening in us? And being able to ask more questions so we can get it in our heads to understand maybe the why, and delve deeper underneath the existence of what is happening over a long period of time. I don't believe it's anything you did specifically, Maria. I don't believe that. I think that it's an accumulation of thoughts and patterns and biology and environment. It's many things. And I'm really glad you were here and asked such a deep question. And Sean, that was a beautiful answer.
Yeah.
Because that isn't a simple answer.
And
Yeah.
Tiffany's question is
simple
really
question.
specific. She's just added a question there. She said, what is the emotion for the brain? So there are 3 dynamic levels that take place within our human form. And that is the clarity of the mind, the clarity of the feelings, and the clarity of the body enable us as a clear channel to deliver the signature of who I am. So if the mind is preoccupied with its own toy that it is repeatedly running, then that can manifest as something in the mind space. And what I love about the mind space is that when we emotionally and physically are able to hold space for the mind will actually settle. No different to how a parent nurtures a child and then the child knows that it's safe. So we're developing the physical body and the emotional body to create a safe space so the mind no longer needs to be terrified in what it thinks. It can receive the intricate nature of nurture, because we are looking at the specific nature of where Maria's brain cancer was.
And just to add a little bit more into that, as we know, the brain has the neuroplasticity. So going back a few decades, they thought the brain was fixed. It didn't have the capacity to change. So now they know that that's not true, and it can change. It can rewire itself. If there has been some toxicity, and going on from what Sean said, that toxicity can relate to the safety that you felt as a younger person and not feeling safe, leading to certain thoughts that you may have had, and maybe certain thoughts that weren't allowed to have an expression. And when we're looking at the brain as well, we're looking at trust, that ability to trust and not overcomplicate things with the thought process, but actually having like a trusting and knowingness, which is also part of that brain energy. And I'd just like to add as well to Tiffany's comment. I used to do telephone counseling. And when I first started doing telephone counseling for the first year, one of the things that really struck me was majority of people that called in with major, major problems that were affecting their life, affecting their happiness on life. I had the thought that if they were able to, I know it's not as easy as this, but if they were able to go to bed and during the process of the night, take a different thought to their problem or a different attitude towards their problem would disappear. They would actually wake up in the morning and they wouldn't have a problem. So we have a lot of challenges with the thinking style of how we think. And we don't always answer. Sorry, I just got distracted by that coming through. We don't always really appreciate that some of the challenges that we have in life are created through our thought pattern. And this doesn't relate necessarily to Maria's brain cancer, but it relates more to Tiffany's question around does our thoughts affect our health? Absolutely. As Christy mentioned, thought.
I agree too. Yes.
Thought creates form. And sometimes there are some parts of our personality that we don't particularly like, and that can also be thoughts. So this creates like a different level of, I'm no longer associated with the original pain because I have such an amazing attitude of positivity, but it doesn't mean that the body is having the same story as the mind. And you see that in the justification when you ask somebody a question and they will tell you a justified reason for why something has happened to them and have disconnect with the actual hurt and the feelings that are occurring in the body and still are in the body. Back over to you, Christy.
Pam also offered a statement in there and a question. She says, when you are a caregiver to someone, how can we remain calm, happy, and joyful during such trying times of confusion and sadness? Where can I find strength to go forward and keep myself in good health? There's two things happening there, Pam. One is the situation for who you are caring for and ensuring that their needs are met. And then if this person is somebody that is close to you, then there is a secondary process. The secondary process is, what is the relationship to me and what is my personal experience to the changes that are occurring? And those two things need to happen in different, predominantly in different spaces. It would be the same when I was caring for my mother, needed to make sure that all of her needs are met. And then inside of me, there is a child that is saying goodbye to that parent, and the experience of what it is for that child or who that person is to me, and therefore I'm bringing a closure, or there's a closure occurring in front of me that I need to participate with as this person departs. Mm-hmm. So there's two processes there, and I need to care for my own individual process as well as comprehending the individual celebration of their life and their circumstances and their situation and how long they are there for. So there's also a question from Marianne. I have just come from a massage where I got in touch with a lot of tension in the right side of my jaw and the top of the right side of my neck. I would love to gain insight into this and why it feels very different than my left side. And so this is starting to look at pathways of tension through the body. The jaw is the reflection of the pelvis. The right-hand side of the jaw specifically looks at how I express myself into the world. And when there's tension, the tension brings up tension to how I express that. Now, the right side of the jaw also connects to the back of the neck. And inside of that, there is what's called the SCM, which is this muscle that helps turn the head. Yeah, the mobility. So we know that there's an extra charge behind the jaw because there's extra tension behind it. So now we need to look at what is it that we're harboring? What is it that we feel we can't say or can't be said or I won't say for fear of consequence? But yet it's in you.
Mm-hmm.
It's your role to share what is in you. That's how we experience who you are. We need to do that in constructive ways that enable equality in the relationships we're having.
And that's a good example, Marianne, of dis-ease in the tissue is happening. If it's ignored, it becomes louder and louder, and it can develop headaches. If it's not addressed, it can develop cracked teeth, right? If it's clenching, the body is always giving us messages. And it's not something you're doing wrong. It's a message being given to you to look at and perhaps expand how you've moved in the world, and push yourself a little bit to express, like Sean was saying, what is that piece? And sometimes the expression is to yourself, to acknowledge that there's something there.
Sometimes we want to scream from the top of a mountain about a circumstance or situation.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's one way to let it out. Does it need to be specifically addressed with an individual? Sometimes it's not an individual. Sometimes it's a group. Sometimes it's something else like that. But it's my response to what's going on.
It's quite interesting because I have been working with Linda, and one of the things we've been working on kind of fits into this, but I hadn't linked them before. Yay. So like I find it very hard to say no.
Oh.
So that would create a tension, I'm guessing.
A big one.
I would think it would. Because then I'm going off and doing things that I don't really want to be doing, but I'm doing anyway.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's really great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're really welcome. And I learned to love symptoms. I learned to love places within myself that created disturbance for my dear brain. Because usually we're conflicted when there's a symptom because it stands in my way. When actually it's a part of me that stands in front of me that wants to be seen before I can progress. So it's integration. Each time there's a symptom or a nuance or something that's around me, it's a part of me talking to me within me. And if my mindset wants to disregard it, then it will be back stronger and bigger for me to understand. Because it's my attitude that is asked to reconsider who it is or who I think I am and become both things. Yeah, we need to let it in. If we try to push it out, we're creating a separation rather than integration.
And a contraction. I do have a question I'm going to read that came in an email for our next one. The straw that broke the camel's back, January 2023. it had been several weeks of not feeling right. I felt dizzy, foggy brained. Daily situations that I typically can't handle seemed very overwhelming. Yet I continued to reason with myself that it's that time of the month, or once we get past this deadline, then it will get better. I remember telling my spouse that if I held on long enough, if I held still long enough, I was going to pass out. And then I did. I fainted at work with an erratic blood pressure and thready pulse taken shortly after the incident, thinking it would get better if I went home to rest and take it easy for a day or two. Only about a few days later, at the end of the workday again, not feeling right in my head, I went to my sister's house to have her take my blood pressure and oxygen levels. I passed out in her kitchen. My blood pressure was 180. I went to the doctor. I still didn't feel right. They didn't find anything. So I started changing my work hours by hiring help. I reintroduced more things that I love to do and take time in the morning for some meditation before I went to work. These changes seemed to be working. At least the symptoms seemed to be more manageable. I learned to stay alert and not relax too much in meetings at work so I wouldn't have any more incidents. I do have them occasionally, if that's what I want to live with and call it. Seems to be getting me by. Last week, I had one of my syncope episodes while in front of an individual, which was humiliating. That's when I decided my, quote, management isn't working anymore. Today, I feel great. Yesterday, I felt exhausted, foggy, and dizzy for the better part of their day. And I would love some insight on this.
Okay, maybe I'll start with that one, Christy.
Yeah.
So it actually sounds very similar to someone I was also working with recently. And one of the things as a therapist session I got them to do was to send in a photo of their body, front, back, sides, take a look at their head placement and to see how connected their head was to the body, and have conversations with them around emotionally what was occurring with what emotions that they're also trying to avoid. And quite often the attention, I think, would be outside of self, and that there could be some emotions that they're actually quite terrified of. So that would be on a one-on-one consultation where I would explore with that. And often fainting in some respects can just be obviously with the blood pressure, but sometimes it's similar to seizures. And there's a part of that where it's like anybody else's body other than mine. So I would really gently, and particularly if whoever's written this is listening, to be really gentle with yourself, but maybe work towards working with, Christy or a therapist to bring you back into what is the emotion that maybe you're afraid of, and to be held within that space to explore that safely and gently, whilst also doing body work to actually assist you to bring you back into your body and to take a look at where the pain shows up in relation to the emotions that you might be finding difficult to explore.
Because blood pressure is something that fluctuates and has an influence directly to the heart organ. Yeah, that's the center of this circular system. And so when the heart is under pressure, under duress, then it changes its relationship to the blood flow. So the higher the blood pressure, and it works at both ends, the higher the blood pressure, the lower the blood pressure, eventually the body has its own natural drop. And that drop is its own protection. And justly so, because it would either explode or otherwise. And when we're emotionally under pressure, then, and you're starting to see something that's becoming physical, then that's already showing us that there's the amount of emotion in the in the room, if the heart was a room, it's like we're trying to cram too much in there and squeeze the door shut. Yes, it's exploding rather than actually being processed. When I say processed, being expressed, being understood, being held, being most of us will have come into contact with grief at some point in our lives. It's allowing an emotion through. This is a much lesser nuance with its experience, but the impact to the body itself is already showing us how this person is relating to themselves emotionally, because the blood represents joy.
Mm.
I
And
love
not that we need to add more joy in. Joy is an experience that takes place naturally when all other emotions are also expressed.
I love the way that you say they're allowing the emotion through and describing it like the rooms, because that is also, it's very similar with anxiety. It's very similar with depression. It may show up in different body symptoms and signals, but it's actually one and the same. If we don't allow the emotion through, it gets pushed away. That creates oppression or a depression, or even things like
Repression.
panic attacks and all things like that. Christy, you've obviously got your thoughts in terms of this as well. What would your response be?
My first response is I would love to take a look at the body of this person, because in psychosomatics, the soft tissue represents our emotional habits and attitudes that we hold. And often we're blind to what those are until we understand them. So for me to look at this person's body and see where the tension or lack of consciousness or muscle tone is held in the body is very specific to where the emotion could be trapped or locked. And so doing some body work and or even bringing awareness to that, I think, is the beginning to opening a window to let some pressure out. Because the mind is doing the pattern of I can do this and trying to figure out what this is. And then there's a disconnect here. And the body is wanting more than what the mind can give it. And I think it's natural to think there again that I need a reason. And then it is like a mental masturbation in the head that keeps going and going and going. And the body's going, no, but it's down here. It's down here. And the beautiful part about body work is it gets you to feel into the body versus into the mind and start connecting those in a very gentle way, so you actually can access that information.
And the
It's
mind
not
is
about
willing
me
and available.
accessing. Say that again, Sean.
The mind is willing and available to allow an emotion through, which is only going to expand on who it thinks it is.
Yes. And that's the key word, is expansion. To create more breath, more blood flow, more awareness in whatever those thoughts are. Instead of containment, we're actually getting movement. And that's how the organ systems are made to work. They actually move with our cerebral spinal fluid flow. They move with our breath. They move with our lymphatic system. And if something's restricted, everything's going to start pulling towards the restriction. That's how the body works. And it's an energetic movement first, and then it becomes dense, and it becomes a physical movement then. So that's why I would look at the body so I can see the patterns and share and get some insight of what the perception is in that holding.
Beautiful, Christy. Lou, what did you have to bring to the table today?
Well, it's my inquiry, and I'd love to hear more about the environment.
Yep, just a little louder if you would.
Okay, let me see. Hang on, where is my...
It might just be your voice.
Somewhere. Okay, let me just project it.
Great.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So my inquiry is all about the environment or the atmosphere. So not so much the environment outside, but more the environment inside, and the discussion about contraction and expansion, the peristalsis, the natural form.
Yep.
And the wave of energy and emotion going from a wave to a particle, or magnetizing more towards it such that it becomes a form. So my question is, like, probably a little bit intense, which is how I am right at this moment, with the archetypes, the 4 main archetypes that we learn about in emotional anatomy component of the psychosomatics course. I'm looking at the various forms, like Christy was saying, to look at a person's body. I am wondering if there are certain diseases that are more prevalent in one archetype than in another archetype, given that we get to hear about how they experience themselves or their relationship to self and others. However, the list to do with psychosomatic diseases is slightly more vague as to what could apply to what. And this goes specifically to my original words, environment or atmosphere. So am I clear with the question enough for you to?
I believe so. Christy, you want to
also
take first?
inquire with me? Thank you.
I would say absolutely. Yes, because the patterns, we're looking at patterns. If you take the personality out, we're looking at patterns of tissue, patterns of how a person's environment has shaped the patterns that has become that body type, and even how the body's held, and how either it's slumped or tucked or opened and big. All of that matters in what comes to fruition at the end of the day, because the patterns, if they don't change, will create dis-ease depending on what that body type is that you're looking at. So for instance, sometimes with the larger belly archetype, someone with a larger belly, smaller legs can have the tendency to develop diabetes.
Yes.
Which is in psychosomatics can be losing the sweetness in life, or not even having tasted sweetness, so they crave sweetness. The body type does show the patterns of specific diseases, dis-ease, 2 words, that become dis-ease, like literal disease. Yes. Unless changed. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
So
is there anything you'd like to add?
When somebody is bound by their current physical archetype, then they process in a habitual way. And when I say process in a habitual way, some people may do mental first and possibly physical, but not the emotional. Some would do only emotional, but not the mental or the physical. There's a mapping that happens in behind that. And the purpose of understanding if you are caught in a habitual process is that we have the flexibility to be all and therefore none. So it's understanding that originally my body was incredibly dense. So I was somebody that would crush myself mentally and therefore bypass emotionally. And that's when we would have that physical crippling feeling. So noticing that that was my habit was a matter of, oh, I now know how to reconfigure how I process life.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's my willingness to experience what is emotionally, which in turn establishes my brain waves, which in turn gives me that physical comfort. And that original archetype had been created through the environment that I grew up in.
Right. Yes.
So I'm no longer locked into that archetype, even though it was my beginning process.
Yes.
Mhm.
In fact, part of my inquiry has, as what I call a self-confessed rigid pattern, part of my inquiry is, what is the gift that I truly am?
So
because I'm soft as mush in my ideal situations, and I'm not ashamed to speak it. I'm able to bridge whatever the gap is between myself and others, where the shield was held in place, kind of thing.
yeah. And the synergy of life is the awareness that my brain exists with whatever attitude it may particularly come to at this point in time. Is it available and inclusive of how I feel?
Right.
And in having my openness to my feelings, is my physical body available to experience that? That's the synergy of life, no matter where I am.
Right.
No matter what conversation I'm having, no matter what interaction I'm having, to be available to those major aspects of who I am enables the purity of the signature of who I am to take center stage.
Yes. Thank you.
That's learning to be me. I'm no longer attached to the circumstances I'm in. I'm now consciously aware that I need to be at all times who I am in order to participate in what this thing is called life that rolls out before me.
Thank you.
Linda, Christine?
Linda, yes, do you
And
have
Linda?
anything?
I was just going to say, sometimes I think it's important to understand more about where the question comes from than the answer to the question itself. Because
Yes.
the question's a good general question, but actually it gives us very little as to the challenge that you're experiencing. And in a different situation, I'd like to go deeper into really understand the nuances of what motivates the question for you personally, to go deeper into that, which is may not be the setting, but that would be where I would take that as an opening for you. Because sometimes the nature of the question actually reveals something more about what's happening behind the scenes. But we need to find that. We need to, kind of
Thank you.
explore that.
Thank you.
Okay. So, gosh, that time went very, very fast. We are probably coming to that time where we'll be closing in terms of the questions. If anyone wants to just add any comments before we officially say goodbye to you today and stop the recording, then please let us know before we do that. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.